Hello everybody, welcome back to this next part of our 132 scale Border Models Lancaster build. This time I'm going to be building the mid-upper turret, and I'm building this at this stage because I've finished the fuselage off, but I just want to make sure that the upper turret will fit in once I've fitted the fairing here to the upper fuselage. I'm not absolutely certain that it will. The Border Models instructions tell you to fit this at this stage and then drop the turret in afterwards, but to be honest, I don't really trust much that the instruction manual tells me. So just to make sure, I'm going to build the turret up and just make sure that it's all going to go together as we need it to. So as you can see, I've cut all the parts out. These have all been taken carefully off the sprues, and I've already cleaned up all the sprue gates on them, so they're all ready to go. These are the transparencies from the kit, and they're okay in this particular example, but I did do a little video over on my Patreon channel describing the replacements I'm going to use for the badly damaged cockpit canopy on my particular model. I've got some replacements for those. I've taken a look at those, as I said, over on Patreon. But these are the kit ones, and they're okay. There's a tiny little crack here at the sprue gate at the bottom, but I think that will be covered up by the fairing that I just showed you earlier on. So let's get some assembly done. So what I want to do is to build up as much of the assembly as I can and then paint it. It's mainly in black, but there are some detail parts to pick out. We've got some seat belts to fit as well from the kit, some photo etched brass ones, and I'm also going to be replacing the kit barrels with these, which are from Master. They're much better than the kit examples. The kit ones are not hollowed out at the end, and although you could do that, it's a bit of a fiddle. But also the cooling jackets as well are hollow in the Master term brass ones. These really are nice additions to the model. This one's for the HK kit actually, but it makes no difference. They fit equally well to the Border ones. So we'll get onto those later. So let's make a start, put the turret together. The assembly is covered on one page of the instructions, as you can see. So this is an FN50 turret that went in the mid-upper position. The FN standing for Frazer-Nash, who were the manufacturers of the turret. And as you can see, it's very detailed when built up. All the turrets are, and I'm going to be building the front and rear turrets in a future episode, but I just wanted to get this one out of the way, as I said, so I can get that test fit done. So I'll just move some of these parts out of the way, then you can see what I'm doing. Perhaps the biggest weakness in this kit is the instructions. It's really difficult to tell from some of the drawings where the parts need to locate. So you need to spend quite a bit of time test fitting, just trying to work out where the parts go. When they are in the correct position, the fit's perfect, but it's not always clear, as I said, from the instructions where parts need to locate. The other problem is that the sequence is sometimes a little bit suspect. So I'm moving away from the instructions at this stage, fitting this side mounting on the right hand side. The instructions actually tell us to fit this assembly, which I've built first of all, into the side mountings, if you like, but the fit of those is so imprecise that it's pretty likely that you'll get them in the wrong position, I think. So fitting this side mounting, if you like, means that it's easier to work out where this central assembly goes. Just before the glue sets on this assembly, I'm just making sure that everything's nice and square. As I said, the locations are a bit hit and miss, so it's easy to get the whole assembly misaligned. But that looks reasonably okay. So I think that's probably the best way to go about putting this together, assembling one of the side frames onto the base and then the central assembly onto the other side frame and then just dropping that in. It means there's not as much to be handling all at once. So anyway, that's gone in. Let's do the gun mounts themselves. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut the barrels off. We'll be replacing those with the master ones. Drill out the holes in the breeches for the replacement barrels. The key thing when you're putting replacement barrels onto guns like this is to obviously get them straight. They'll look really odd if you don't manage to do that. So it's just worth spending a bit of time getting them lined up properly. One interesting thing just to note about the master barrels is that they're actually quite a bit longer than the kit ones. You can see the difference in size there, probably about 3mm, something like that. And I have checked the dimensions and the master barrels are the correct length. The shortfall in the kit barrels is in the length of the cooling jacket. The flash suppressor is probably about the same size, but the cooling jacket's shorter by about that 3mm, as I said. So not only are these more detailed, they're a better representation of the Browning. These are the hand grips, basically the control grips for the gunner. I'll get some close-up shots of these if you're building the kit, because it's very unclear how these attach in the instructions. But I've looked up a really good resource on YouTube, another channel on YouTube, which covers the various stations on the Lancaster. It's a really good production and it gives you some fantastic detail about the various stations, as I said, on the Lancaster, including the mid-upper turret. So you can use that to get these in the correct position. And you'll notice here that this grip for this side is a replacement. I've actually lost one of these somewhere in the box, so I've had to resin cast a copy, which is this part here. Perfect replica of the original. So fitting the overall frame here, this circular, semicircular frame, I'm doing it at this stage, it's slightly out of sequence. You're meant to put the guns in first, but I think we'll get away with it. I'm doing it this way because I want to paint the guns separately. Okay, so that's the main assembly for the turret, as far as I can break it down prior to painting. So I'll get all these parts mounted up and we'll give them a coat of Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. And for the top coat I'll probably use a NATO black or a rubber black. I don't want a jet black on these parts. And we'll do a little bit of dry brushing as well, just to bring out all this lovely detail. Okay, so we've got the parts back from painting, and I've used NATO black on these parts in the main. I've got some green obviously here and some desert yellow for the cartridge bags, but most of the assembly is in black. But just to bring out a little bit of detail, I want to do some dry brushing, and I'm going to use some rubber black to start with. So just gently go around all the detail and gradually you'll get it to pop out. It's a slow process, don't want to rush it. Hardly any paint on the brush at all, but rubber black is just enough, it's just light enough to catch the edges of all the detail. It's at this stage when you start the dry brushing that you realise you finally see all the fantastic detail that Wingnut Wings put into this model to start with. Just add in a little bit of grey into that dry brush mix. The rubber black doesn't pick up enough, doesn't give enough contrast. When I'm brush painting, in this case some green for the cushions on the seat, I just want to add a little bit of retarder. It just helps the paint to flow a little bit better, it reduces the brush marks and obviously slows the drying time down a little bit. It just allows the paint to settle so you get a smoother finish with it. Just a couple of drops, that's all you need. These are Citadel paints, which those of you that watch the channel a bit will know that I use quite a lot for this sort of stage of the build where you're doing all the detail painting. These are the cartridge bags. I'm not sure how much of these you're going to be able to see from above the turret, but just do a little bit of highlighting on them just to hopefully show them out a little bit better. This is just a bit of brown Tamiya panel liner. This goes into the creases, highlights the detail a little bit more. I think that'll be alright, don't need to spend too much on these, they're going to be hidden down in the tub. These are the ammunition feeds, at least the upper part of them that feeds into the gun. And I've just picked these out with a little bit of brass paint, the bullets, in some Mr. Metal colour brass. But I also like to pick out the bullets with some panel line accent colour. Again, I'm using the dark brown that I used on the collector bags. And that just really enhances the detail in the chutes themselves, or the feeds. So they're ready to go on. Just using a tiny drop of CA for these. Again, I'm slightly out of sequence here. I should have put the guns in the mountings, but it's not going to make any difference, I don't think. So let's press on. Now the guns, I just need to drop the guns into the carriage. So this is quite a tight fit. You just need to open the side frames up a little bit. And with a bit of wiggle room, they'll drop in eventually, hopefully. So the gun's safely in position. Fit the cartridge bags next. Now I've got an obstruction here, the bucket if you like. The drum here doesn't fit properly onto the underside, and it can only be the ammunition collection bags that are fouling, because they're the only things that I've added, and this did fit before that. So I've just trimmed the tops off of those, and that now gives us the correct fit. So I'm just picking out what looks like some sort of bottle or canister on the gunner's control panel. This is where it's important to have good references for the particular airframe that you're building, because although most Lancaster didn't survive that long, this one did, and because of that it had modifications over time, one of which was a new rear turret. And the early turrets, like this mid-upper, had the internal frame picked out in natural metal. I assume it was aluminium. So I'm picking this out in Tamiya gloss aluminium. The replacement rear turret at the time at which I'm modelling the aircraft had black frames. So two of the turrets that I'll be building for the model will have these aluminium frames, and the rear will be in black. So it's just nice to get those little details right. And obviously this upper frame is very visible through the transparency. This is Tamiya lacquer gloss aluminium. Goes on really nicely with a brush. Don't worry about the gunfire, folks. It's just the demise of the local rabbits, I'm afraid. This is the gun sight, which is actually provided in a transparency, as you can see. Most of this we're going to paint black in a moment. Okay, so with a bit of careful painting, it is possible to be able to see through the sight, through the transparency. And what I've done is just add a little bit of silver onto the outside body of the transparency, so that just reflects a little bit of light through the sight itself, so you can see through it. This is just a little bit of Tamiya brown panel liner. It works really well on silver and aluminium. Border also supply the seat so that it can hang down in the unused position, if you like that. So that's the actual turret finished. What we've got to do next is fit the transparencies, but what I'm going to do is leave this for a day, because I have used some CA on this assembly and I don't want to get any fumes onto the transparencies, so I'll just leave it a day for the CA fumes to gas off, and then hopefully we can get the transparencies masked off and fitted. The transparency comes in two halves, which is always a bit tricky, a bit nerve-wracking to get it assembled, but it is a pretty good fit. So I'm going to get it lined up and use a tiny amount of Tamiya extra thin just to tack it together. You obviously have to be very careful with this step. It'd be pretty easy to completely mess these transparencies up. So I'm just starting at the top here, letting it set, and I'll put a little bit more down at the bottom as well. This is Tamiya extra thin quick setting. So that's just tacked together. Now Border actually don't have us gluing the two transparency halves together in the instructions like I've done here. It tells us to glue the front half to the turret assembly and then separately assemble the rear transparency. But I can't really see how you would do that, because you would either have to paint the frames on the transparencies and then touch them up after you've glued them together, or mask them off and paint them once you've assembled both onto the turret. But this way you can mask the whole turret glazing off, paint it, and then fit it to the turret itself. So hopefully that's a better way of doing it. Time will tell. Now I've got a very slight gap on both sides, so I'm just filling that with a little bit of canopy glue, and hopefully when we mask off and paint the frames, that'll disappear. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry now, let the CA flash off, and come back tomorrow and we'll get that assembled. Okay, day after, and everything's dry. This transparency's come out pretty well, really. I was quite worried about joining it. And now I'm going to mask it off. I'm going to be using this, which is from a company called Ask Distribution. It's the first time I've used their masks, and it's a kind of a kabuki tape, really. I've used them on one or two of the other transparencies already. I've not come across this company before, and I suppose by this time, with the kit being out for quite some time now, Edward will have a similar product. So it's one thing, one of the accessories or aftermarket that I really would invest in. The Lancaster glazing's very extensive, and it's a big job to cut these out yourself. You can see there's 3 sheets for this kit. So if you didn't have one of these, you'd be spending hours, I suspect, cutting out all these transparency panels. The tricky thing is to find them on the sheet. They're a nice fit, very exact fit. Some of these masks are multi-part just because of the curvature of the glazing. This one's a bit big, so I'll cut it in half. Got a bit of a mismatch here, so I'll just supplement it with some Tamiya tape. So I'll carry on, get all the rest on, and then we'll use some liquid latex to fill in the spaces. This is the latex that I'm going to use to fill in the spaces on the masking. This is used for body painting, makeup and such like. But it's really a really good alternative to specialist hobby products like Maskol and other masking fluid. So I actually just decant a little bit into, well, it's an old Maskol jar actually. So just let that dry, and then I'll paint the frames in some black, and hopefully we'll get that fitted to the rest of the turret. Okay, let's see how we've done. So this has had a coat of Mr. Surfacer black, followed by a top coat of Tamiya Lacquer flat black. Well, so far so good. So that's a good result. I'm happy with that, especially the join between the two halves of the transparency. That's disappeared under the paint. The only thing I'm going to have to sort out is the paint's a little bit thin. I've not got enough in this recess here where the guns protrude. So I'll just go back in with some acrylic black. I'll actually do it from the inside, that'll blank it out. So a quick check to make sure that everything's clean inside. And we'll try and get this onto the turret. So I've just removed a couple of little notches that to locate the ring at the bottom here, but they're just obstructing a little bit, and I don't want to force this transparency. It's very brittle plastic, as I've mentioned before, and it would be easy to crack it by putting any sort of excess pressure on it. Okay, so I'm going to leave that unglued for the moment, at least until I come to fit it to the airframe. Now what I wanted to do was check that this turret would go in after I'd fitted the fairing. So I'll just check that now. So this is unglued at the moment, and what we should be able to do is just drop this in. It's got a couple of keys on it. So that's absolutely fine, no problem at all. The only thing missing from the whole assembly are a couple of guides, and there were little wheels on a rod, which the wheels rode on this track around the edge of the fairing, and as they did up and down, they lifted the gun barrels up and down as well, and that was to prevent the guns fouling on the airframe. And it was also connected to the interrupter gear, so there was an interrupter which prevented the guns from firing when they were in line with the vertical stabilizers at the back here. But I'm not going to be able to fit those rods and wheels. They come in the kit, but I'm not going to be able to fit them until the turret's in place and lined up, which will be towards the end of the build, I guess. So that's the FN50 mid upper turret finished. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for part 6. I'm happy with that progress for this one. And I'm going to be concentrating over the next 2 to 3 weeks on the Tornado. I want to get that finished. I realised yesterday that it's only 6 weeks now to Scale Model World at Telford, and I need to have the Tornado finished for that event. I might enter it into the competition, I've not decided yet, but in any case it's got to go to its new owner down at Telford. So I need to crack on with that. I've been working on the painting and decal stage. It's all decaled up now, and I want to do some weathering in the next day or two. So as I said, I'm going to leave it there, everybody, and I hope it's been useful for those of you that are building the Border Models kit. I hope you're enjoying it. It's a nice kit to go together if you're careful with it. As you've seen in the first few episodes, you've got to have your wits about you when you're building this one. So hopefully following along might be of some help to you if you are building the kit. But in the meantime, everybody else, enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon, probably for the Tornado. Bye for now.